Good afternoon, journalists. Allow me, first of all, to thank you for attending today in this press conference, which also gives me the opportunity to reiterate the gratitude of the government of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea to all of the member countries of the United Nations for the strong support that was given to us during the elections of the non-permanent members to the Security Council during the elections that took place on the 12th of June for the period 2018-2019, with 185 votes in favor of Equatorial Guinea. I've invited you to this press conference as ambassador and permanent representative of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea to the United Nations to condemn and to reject the judgment that was carried out in Paris, delivered in Paris, of the 19th of June to the 6th of July this year against His Excellency, the Vice President of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, Don Teodoro Mange, in the supposed case that is called ill-acquired assets. It's very clearly a political plot which was led by Transparency International France with the complicity of Mr. William Bourdon and Mr. Levesque, all of them with interests in the Republic of Equatorial Guinea, who were not able to be part of the oil business. Then they have brought together this plot with the objective of destabilizing the regime so that they could achieve their objectives in this way. As witnesses to this false political trial, Transparency International France resorted to elements such as Badade, who was sentenced in Equatorial Guinea in 2013 and in Cameroon in 2014. And a group of opponents to the regime, such as Brother Herman Pirontomo and others, all of them who are well recognized as elements who have obstructed, who have tried to bring about change in the regime of the country, such as the failed attempt of the mercenary invasion of 2004, as was declared by Mr. Simon Mann during the trial. In order to try to provide a legal cover to the trial, they resorted to Correct, an association that involves several opposition non-legal political parties and who are based on the outside, who were designated as a civil party to the trial, when we know that the French Penal Code only recognizes a particular party when its existence is longer than 5 years. Correct was created in 2015. It's only been around for 2 years. And that shows that their participation is invalid. And their objective was only to obtain funds for their political activities. But due to the poor distribution of these funds among the members, it was a shameful public ruckus. As a result, journalists, Mr. Levesque and Mr. Bourdon and Transparency International France, all of them with economic interests in Equatorial Guinea, a conglomerate as well as a group of non-legal political parties, they cannot be part of a trial against a senior official in Guinea-Bissau. With the request for 30 million euros in penalty and the seizure of all of the goods, including the diplomatic mission, the French justice did not respect the decision of the International Court of Justice. And in fact, they should have waited for the announcement of the International Court of Justice, as well as the immunity that protects the Vice President. In short, both the Correctional Court of Paris, as well as the judge of first instance who presided over the trial, they are not qualified, nor are they apted to judge a vice president of the Republic. it has been a criminal trial without victims, because in the case of a killing, there has to be a corpse. But in the case that we're dealing with, since there are no victims, they decided to resort to Corette, an association of political parties in exile to whom the French justice attributes the power to recognize them as legitimate representatives of the people of Equatorial Guinea. But as we've already pointed out, they are not a valid party. And lastly, the decision on the precautionary measures of the International Court of Justice compels French courts to take no decision until that legal authority of the United Nations has spoken out on the substance of the matter. French courts under the instigation of Transparency International France and the group is going against the Vice President of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. They are charging them with supposed crimes that were committed in Equatorial Guinea. It's a perpetrator and national of Equatorial Guinea, and the victims is also from Equatorial Guinea. But the principle of territoriality and sovereignty attributes the competence to the courts of Equatorial Guinea, for whom there was no and has never been any crime. The French justice is not qualified in this case, and all of their actions have been null and void. Therefore, I declare that this trial is not valid, and I condemn before the international community the maneuvers to destabilize the political regime of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea by some elements with hidden interests in the country and linked to some of the promoters of the mercenary attempt against our country. This false trial is just a plan B to try to achieve the objectives that they couldn't achieve in 2004, which are to take over the resources of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea. Now, from the headquarters of the United Nations, I call upon the international community to put an end to these maneuvers that aim to undermine peace and sustainable development that are enjoyed by the people of Equatorial Guinea. Thank you very much.
Gracias por la conferencia de prensa.
Well, thank you for the press conference. I'm going to ask my question in English, with your permission. Yes, you can ask your question in English. Good.
First, I wanted to. I've seen that even the Swiss government has attached some vehicles belonging to the vice president. I wanted to know: are there other countries that you think are respecting this judgment too much? But also, given that you're about to join the Security Council, and that France is a permanent member, do you think? Have you had discussions with the mission here? Do you think, given that this is the French justice system, and I think, unless I'm wrong, that a previous settlement was reached by the vice president on U.S. corruption charges. I guess I'm looking for a little bit more. Do you think that the accession to the Security Council should somehow resolve this issue? And how do you think it's going to be when you're on the council, given that France has taken this position? Thanks.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much for that question. Well, first of all, what strikes us as strange, what strikes the government of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea and other governments as well in Africa as being strange, especially the governments of Central Africa, to whom this issue of improperly acquired goods has been attributed. What strikes us is that it is not the leaders of the countries who acquired goods in other countries, either in France, Switzerland, or other countries. I believe that several public officials linked either directly or indirectly to the government have acquired yachts, lands, a lot of goods, but mention was never made of the fact that these were goods acquired through illicit means. Generally speaking, we report and we denounce all of these maneuvers, either in France or in Switzerland. I must say something. In order to purchase goods, there is a procedure of transfer of funds. The Republic of Equatorial Guinea is a member of the free zone with the central bank of the States of Central Africa. Funds go through that institution and through Paris. And that is how goods are purchased from suppliers. There have been no reports because for money laundering to have taken place, there has to be some dirt involved. How can the money be dirty if the transfer took place legally and the goods were acquired legally? But at some point, this whole thing turns into a illicit transaction. So we think that it is a connection of the same elements I mentioned before, who are promoting this whole plot against the government of the Republic of Guinea and all the governments in the sub-region. And it matches exactly that all of these countries have natural resources. They all have a wealth of natural resources. That is no coincidence, because there is no other country that is not involved in this issue for similar reasons. And to conclude, I wanted to say that we don't agree. We believe that this is a maneuver by the same group that sent in the mercenaries, the group which first tried to accuse the president of the Republic of illicit acquisition of goods and saw that they didn't have any data on that, no information, and so they decided to turn against the vice president. And all of this is precisely to destabilize our government. For us, this is a political trial, with the aggravating factor that the International Court of Justice found that cautionary measures had to be taken until it issued a decision. In spite of this, the French justice system went ahead with this trial, which is illegal, and now they're trying to. Now they say that sentencing will take place next October, without even waiting for the findings of the International Court of Justice.
Thank you, Joseph Klein of Canada Free Press. Two questions. First of all, have you enlisted the help of the leadership of the African Union and sub-regional organizations in Africa, economic organizations, et cetera, to hopefully get their support for a protest of what you're saying is a political invalid trial? And secondly, is your government considering going back to the International Court of Justice before October to ask for another ruling to either enjoin or declare that the French proceedings are premature? Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Efectivamente.
Thank you very much. Indeed, the government has sent messages to the Commission of the African Union. They're aware of this, in fact, of the support. And also, on the 21st of this month, I have to deliver a message from the President of the Republic to the Secretary General of the United Nations on this case, which, as we said, is very clearly a politically motivated case that doesn't have any substance. What was the second question?
Whether your government is planning, or maybe already has initiated, an action to go back to the International Court of Justice to seek its intervention with respect to the French trial as being premature, invalid, etc., given what you described as its prior ruling.
Efectivamente, señor, esa opción.
Yes, indeed, that option is on the table. It's on the table because we understand that the International Court of Justice is the authority, the supreme international authority, and the one that we have to resort to when we feel that we have been dealt with unjustly. Because we in Equatorial Guinea, we don't understand, nor can we even imagine that you would judge a national in the country for acts that were allegedly committed in their country of origin, in his country of origin. That's incomprehensible to us. And so whatever the verdict is, we're not going to recognize this, and it's going to be null and void, depending on the circumstances. We do have the option of resorting to the International Court of Justice.
Any of them.
Monsieur l'ambassadeur, concernant...
Yes, I'd like to ask you a question, Mr. Ambassador. Considering the question of extraterritoriality first, since the French are trying the vice president of now, is it under international law? Is there a particular authority that France has or has acquired to judge a citizen who is a dignitary of another country? Well, first of all, you will have observed that during my statement, I didn't mention the French government. Bearing in mind the impartiality of the French justice system vis-à-vis governments, we want to leave outside the French government. We're repeating that it's the French justice system. They have acted without respecting the right of extraterritoriality. Because this topic, well, the United Nations and the International Court of Justice, they've already seen this, and they were against the seizure of the property of the diplomatic mission. Also in question is the immunity of the vice president. Furthermore, a vice president is not judged by a criminal correctional court. And normally it's a civil court. In our country, a president is a member, and members of the government are tried by the Supreme Court of Justice. So in this case, this is a judge, a first instance, who presided over the trial, and that's not valid for the level of the figure that we are dealing with, a vice president of the Republic. They haven't taken into account that consideration, and neither French law nor international law were taken into account. It was all concocted by a group of people, because Mr. Bourdon, with Mr. Levesque, they have a cabinet in Guinea, in Equatorial Guinea, and they weren't able to get into the oil business. And what happened? Well, they tried to create or to fabricate a trial, a false trial, a phony trial, to create an atmosphere of destabilization of the country. That's the very substance of the matter. And during the trial, they didn't even give an opportunity to the lawyers to defend the vice president, to be able to defend him. As was said by the lawyer Massy, there was not even any evidence. There was a single piece of evidence. They didn't find any evidence at all. But they went forward because they are determined to take this trial as far as it could go, because they believe that with that, the situation is going to be destabilized in the country. And that's what is happening against a small country such as Equatorial Guinea, a peaceful country that doesn't get in trouble with other countries, that doesn't get involved in the internal affairs of other countries, that hasn't committed any crime in France. They have devoted themselves, like any physical or legal person, to conduct purchases like citizens of other countries who make purchases in France and the United States and other countries. But from there to say that these are ill-gotten goods, well, I would say to Transparency International that they should widen their range of actions to be more transparent, that they go back a bit in history when slavery those transatlantic slaves who were brought over and produced great wealth in other countries. This wealth that was produced, wasn't that ill-gotten goods? Why doesn't transparency mention that? People who come to our countries who decide to work with and corrupt officials, and they obtain contracts through corruption, and they go back to their countries with these goods in a short period of time. Why aren't they called ill-gotten goods? Now, if during the trial it was established that Bourdon is in contact with Mr. Halil, and this Mr. Halil was part of the plot, the attempted coup by mercenaries. The two are in touch, and that shows very clearly that this is a plan B for them. The coup failed, and now they've resorted to plan B. And that's why we're drawing the attention of the international community, because in recent years we have seen many things in the world. We've seen innocent people who are suffering because of this type of maneuver. But when people suffer and there are problems, that's when they call upon the UN to send a peace mission, or to send observers, to send people to resolve the conflicts. We think that it's better to prevent things from happening, the policy of prevention. And what we want to do is to stop this group of individuals that is protected by the French government, this group of ambitious people who wanted to put Mr. Moto during the, with Severo Moto. He was in a neighboring country in Africa, so that once the mercenaries would have succeeded, they would bring Severo Moto to become president of the country. And with him in power, they would do whatever they wanted to do. That is the question that we want to present to the international community. They didn't respect our extraterritorial rights, and that was the French justice system. And not even the fact that Corrette, with the civil party, they have been around for 5 years, and that's something that is dictated by the French system of justice. They have to exist for 5 years or longer, and they haven't been in existence that long.
Could you please identify yourself? Bearing in mind the fact that you've mentioned Transparency International, what if African countries were to decide to bring to justice the countries that pillaged their resources during the period of slavery? Is there an international system which is able to bring these people to justice? This is an option which is also open and which our head of state has already considered, which is to bring Transparency International France to court. If there are 2 or 3 or 4 states that are being victimized by these this kind of machinations, they have the option of bringing them to justice in an at an international level. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Please, there was.
Okay. Excellence.
Your Excellency, I have a two-part question. First of all, I would like to know if it is a citizen of Equatorial Guinea who filed charges against the vice president for having invested the country's money in France, or if it was a unilateral decision, either of the French government or French justice, to bring the first vice president to trial. In the first case, I cannot understand this. The fact that I can invest in a given country and they file charges against me when my money is enriching the banks and the society of that country. So I'm kind of confused. I don't know if you have an answer to this. And Well, since you are confused, I must say that we are even more confused than you are, sir, because in Equatorial Guinea, there has been no complaint of whatsoever. In our country, high-level member of the government can conduct their own businesses. Our laws do not forbid that. You can have a private business, you can conduct business activities, and in the framework of these activities, the vice president made purchases with his own funds, and the transfers were conducted from his personal bank accounts and not accounts of the National Treasury. So we cannot understand why, if there was no complaint filed from Equatorial Guinea, and neither the courts of Equatorial Guinea, nor the Senate, nor the Parliament filed any complaint. It wasn't even the French government that was involved. It was an NGO, a non-governmental organization, Transparency International France. It was they who brought this whole thing to court, supported by Mr. Levesque and Mr. Bourdon as their lawyers. And these three are linked to businesses in Equatorial Guinea and other countries in the sub-region. Now, when they did not achieve their objective, the share that they wanted of the oil industry, they decided to get revenge by setting up this trial. That's the only answer I can give you. In Equatorial Guinea, everybody is confused and they're wondering why all of this is going on. Because he's not the only person who's invested money abroad. There are leaders from other regions of the world who turn to Europe or to the Americas or Africa or Asia, and they buy entire hotels and as well as other properties. But nobody complains. Nobody complains that they're not paying taxes or anything. But just because of a few cars and a building, there's this enormous scandal. And why is that? The purpose of all this ultimately is quite different.
Matthew Lee, Inner City Press. I'm sorry. Most interested in the sort of diplomatic ramifications. Do you feel? I mean, France has an extensive history in Central Africa, and there are many other longtime presidents in Gabon and Cameroon, other countries. Do you feel that, in particular, given that you were not historically a French part of the French world, do you think that Equatorial Guinea is being treated differently by the French justice system than some of the countries in which France has more extensive relations? And have you spoken, for example, with Gabon, Cameroon, other countries in the region, to see whether they're facing the same type of scrutiny in France? And also, just unrelated to the current controversy, how is it coming in terms of joining the Lusophone group, or the group of Portuguese-speaking countries in West Africa? Where does that stand? Thanks a lot.
What I can tell you is that, first of all, this situation, we in Central Africa believe that we are being treated on an equal basis, not on the same basis as countries of other regions, because mention has also been made of ill-gotten goods in the hands of the president of Gabon, of the Congo, and all the other countries in Central Africa that are resource-rich. But in other regions, no mention is made of this kind of thing. So Equatorial Guinea is the only Spanish-speaking country in Central Africa, or in Sub-Saharan Africa, to be more accurate. And this is a major handicap because Equatorial Guinea is surrounded by French, English, and Portuguese-speaking countries. So to emerge from isolation, from this situation, it entered the free zone. And French became the second official language in our country. And a few years ago, we also entered the community of Portuguese-speaking countries, the CPLP, because we also speak Portuguese, and why not join the Commonwealth as well, so we can speak English too? Because let's not forget that in the history of Equatorial Guinea was first of all a Portuguese colony, And then it was traded to Spain for the Santa Catalina Islands, which are close to Brazil, and Fernando Po Island, which is in Africa. These islands were swapped. And the first colonial government of Equatorial Guinea was an Englishman. Spain only began the colonization almost a century after, and so Portugal colonized us, but because of the issue of slavery, England supplanted Portugal and took over the colony. So it's normal, and besides, in this entire process of colonization, there were many African brethren, both from Nigeria and Liberia and Ghana, who came to our country to work in the cocoa industry and others. So it's not surprising that we have all of those languages. Of course, this is not always well received. Maybe this is part of the problem, but I think that more than anything, during the 11 years of the previous regime of Macias in Equatorial Guinea, Transparency International did nothing for Equatorial Guinea. They didn't say that the people of Equatorial Guinea were suffering and Macias had to be removed. It was only in the 90s when the oil industry started up in Equatorial Guinea. It was only then that Transparency International and other countries became interested in Equatorial Guinea. And that was when we had the attempted coup by mercenaries. But the change of government took place because of we Equatorial Guineans ourselves. But there was no external interference apart from the attempted coup. So the main target seems to be our resources. Simon Mann said so clearly, and it's appeared in other books that were published. That is what they're aiming for. There are other elements that are mixed up in this entire set of schemes, and there are multi-millionaire companies that are trying to grow their base through the industries of Equatorial Guinea.
Your debate, if your thematic debate will be on these topics, but I guess we'll find out when you join the council.
Bueno,
Well, we'll see. We'll see when the time comes. The main objective of the Security Council is to ensure that that international peace and security are preserved. So we think that all of the moves that can be made to endanger peace in the world or in a given region or in a given country are issues that are within the mandate of the Security Council. We have to watch what's going on. There are elements that are trafficking weapons, that are influence peddlers, that hire mercenaries, and they try to destabilize legal governments. And we have to move against them because at the end of the day, it is they who are creating the chaos that we see in many countries of the world.
Okay, merci.
Thank you. What I'd like to know is what really is the stakes in this matter, in this parity of justice. The state of Equatorial Guinea, do they want to respond to this? To respond to this justice system and the actions of the French justice system? What do you intend to do? Well, the government of the Republic of Equatorial Guinea is studying the different options and the different measures to be taken against all of these moves. Yes.
You're saying that two NGOs, Transparency International and Sherpa, brought the case, and their motive was to retaliate for not having access to your oil industry. Can you clarify exactly what you're talking about?
Yes, I do clarify it. Quiere decir que yo aclaro y lo.
Yes, I'm clarifying it and I'm reaffirming it. This is the basis of this whole business.
Yes, I'm not asking you to precisely speculate, or you are a diplomat, but Transparency International has generally been perceived as part of the sort of panoply of quasi-private, quasi-public agencies used by the US government to further its agenda throughout the world. We know that Africa has primarily been the domain of colonial powers like France, Spain, Portugal, England. But the US has had particular interest in Africa lately. It's set up AFRICOM in the country, a branch of the US, of the Pentagon in Africa. You said that this is aimed at destabilizing Equatorial Guinea, and I would presume the region. Is it possible that there's more to this than just a French involvement, but could the US have a hand in this? I ask because of Transparency International's involvement.
Ya vimos el caso cuando
We've already seen the case. Transparency International tried to do the same thing in the United States, but the U.S. government intervened and they reached an agreement, as you know. They reached an agreement with the vice president, and that question was resolved. But despite this type of solution and measure that was adopted in the U.S., the French justice system, through the same NGO, which did not achieve its objective in the United States, they took it to France. They took it to France, and it's the NGO. I'm saying once again that we're not getting involved with the governments. When this process was underway, the U.S. government intervened. The Department of Justice prepared an arrangement, and the matter was resolved. I believe that Transparency International France should have followed the example of the United States. But since their motives are completely different, they went through with the trial, and that's where we stand today. Despite the fact that, as I've said, they've created this totally illegal environment. A correctional court cannot judge a vice president. A judge of first instance cannot judge a vice president. When the International Court of Justice intervened in the matter and took a decision, this decision should be respected. It should be respected, and they didn't want to respect it and uphold it. And this means that the interests that are at the bottom of this matter are very deep in order to reach a certain objective.
Yeah, but you didn't explain how these NGOs wanted access to the oil industry. I mean, you didn't clarify what their specific motives were and how they tried to get access to the oil industry.
como hacen varios otros,
As many others have done, they submitted they made a submission to be able to sell crude oil, but we don't think that Transparency International can be judge and jury. They cannot be both judge and jury because the technical consultancy they have, and they brought in their friend Bourdon as a lawyer, as a consultant, and from there they wanted to get a share of the oil-producing activities. They were not accepted, and that is where this whole problem sprang from. I also wanted to point out that in Equatorial Guinea and all the projects that are taking place and all the development projects, both for infrastructure and schools, hospitals, water, sanitation, and so on, we've always had calls for tenders. We've always had calls for tenders, so they might... you can see that there are American, Moroccan, Brazilian, Egyptian, Swedish, French, Chinese companies. Companies from every conceivable country have been working in my country. Now, there are some companies that are used to being given a contract directly without a tender being issued for things like airports, ports, football stadiums during the Africa Cup. the building of major highways, the supply of drinking water. All of these projects took place through calls for tenders, not through direct awards, which is what some companies are used to. And since the interests of some of these companies were affected, they said, all right, well, now we have to take action. And this really is where all of this maneuvering, this trial originated. Because nobody, until now, French justice has not given clear evidence as to why the vice president of Equatorial Guinea is being brought to trial. I'm holding this press conference here. I said that I'm going to give a message to the Secretary General of the United Nations, as we have to the African Union, so that anything that is brought against my country and my government is within the knowledge of the international community. They're trying to destabilize the government of my country, and this is what I've come to report here at the United Nations. All of these elements involved have to be stopped. Simon Mann, who led the mercenary coup, turned a witness at the trial. He made very clear, detailed statements about the involvement of these elements. Now that they've failed, they have turned to their plan B. And this is the situation. I would like to ask the representatives of the media who are here to kindly disseminate this information, to pass on all the information I have brought to you here today. Very well then. If there are no further questions, once again, I would like to thank you most sincerely for your participation at this press conference. And once again, I would also like to thank the 185 countries and all of the other member states of the United Nations who supported the candidacy of Equatorial Guinea as an elected member of the Security Council, where my country is planning to work together with and in harmony with all other countries for the cause of international peace and security. Once again, I'd like to thank you for participating.
Very quick question. Was France amongst those countries that supported your country for the Security Council? Did they abstain or did they vote against?
There's no way of knowing because this was conducted by secret ballot. But in the contacts that we had with the ambassador of France, he expressed his support for us. I had 2 or 3 conversations with the ambassador of France who said that he was going to support us. I think that if he said so, there's no reason to think that he did otherwise. But I don't know this definitely because the elections were conducted through secret ballot. Thank you very much.